Welcome to Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I'm Drew Carter, a member of the worship ministry, and I will be the worship associate this morning. This Sunday, our congregation is sort of celebrating all of the ministries across Live Oak, and so the worship ministry decided to take a little bit of our prerogative and take the opportunity in our worship service this morning to show our work just a little bit, to kind of give you some insight into what we are thinking as we plan our Sunday services and why. So as we move through the service, we're going to do a little bit more introduction of each element, a little bit of context and explanation. So, right at the top, we want to welcome you with a statement that expresses the mission of Live Oak. Live Oak is an open, welcoming, and inclusive community grounded in love, providing opportunities for spiritual growth for seekers of all ages and stages. We actively live our values of diversity, compassion, and justice to humanity and the earth. And then we follow that with a statement that was written by the late Gloria Liggett, a worship associate and a descendant of the Tongva people. And this is our land acknowledgement. We here at Live Oak and in many of our homes are located on the traditional land of the Chumash. In recognizing this, we pay respect to the Chumash people, the history and the culture of the community, and all Native Americans as America's first peoples. We acknowledge and appreciate the Chumash people who are alive today, as well as the generations to come, as we continue to help steward this land which we all love. Okay, we've got the logistics and the announcements out of the way, and so now the next thing for me to do, I'm going to light this candle here. And the candle sits in the chalice. And this chalice is a symbol of the Unitarian Universalist faith and traditions. From a group, a denomination that doesn't have a lot of symbols, we have the chalice. And so you can see we've got chalices on our shelves around the sanctuary. We've got a whole quilt of chalices here up front in the middle of our sanctuary. It represents also the diversity of our ideas and the many ways that we worship. And so while each UU congregation has its own way of doing things, lighting a chalice, it can be like drawing a circle. It separates us from maybe the normal run of our lives, but it also, in a way like this flame, connects us all together, reaching out to others that are worshiping with us. So we begin with these words. In Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world, the symbol of the lighted flame in a chalice unites members in worship and symbolizes our faith in action. It represents the warmth of community and the flame of hope. The flaming chalice, like our faith, stands open to receive new truths that pass the tests of reason, justice, and compassion. And so as I light this chalice in the sanctuary, those of us on Zoom are invited to light your own chalice or candle, joining us in this connection which sets us aside from the mundane world. We choose some special words each week to read aloud after we have lit the chalice. So let's read aloud the chalice lighting words by Sarah Ruth McCoy Davis, which will appear on your screens. We light this chalice with an open heart. We light this chalice with resolve. We light this chalice with tears still fresh on our cheeks. We light this chalice in hope, a tiny flame we nurture. We light this chalice with reverence for this place, for these people, for this time. We light this chalice with all our souls longing to be who we are, to be who we will become, to be ourselves. We light this chalice in self-love, in giving love, in holy love.
Welcome to this house of memory and celebration. This part is the call to worship. It is the official crossing into the realm of mystery. The earlier elements prepare us, and now we open ourselves to what we came for. This is the crossing over from the ordinary to the profound, from the outer to the inner. Often there are evocations of water in the various readings that are used for this portion of our proceedings. Come down to the river, or what we thirst for. This is our desire to be nourished. This is part of why we participate in these gatherings. The old language was invocation. We are calling. Well, the call to worship is that we are called, and then we come and call upon things larger than ourselves. Things like communion with each other and with our values and with the meaning of life, the big things. This is getting beyond our daily concerns and getting down to the deeper wisdom. And to be in the spirit of this activity, we need to empty ourselves, set our ordinary worries aside a little bit, the concerns that we carry around, and be open to something more. And that's why we sing an opening song, sometimes called the gathering hymn, but I prefer opening song. Not only that we are opening the ceremony, but that we are opening ourselves.
This portion of the service, the food collection, is just an expression of our desire to be part of our community and to help our neighbors. So as has been our tradition for many years, each week we take a collection of non-perishable food items for those facing food insecurity in our community. So if you've brought food to donate to the Food Bank of Santa Barbara County today, please bring it up to the basket on the chancel, or you can just hold it up in the air and some kind soul will walk around and pick it up and bring it up here for you. So while we do this, please join in singing From You I Receive.
We now move into our time of contemplation, meditation, prayer. And probably every person here has their own unique approach to prayer, but it does form an indispensable component of our service. It is a time of quiet. And so we will begin this time with some words to help inspire you and guide your meditation. Then there will be a time of silence. How long? I usually just stand up here until I feel everybody is a little bit uncomfortable and wait just a bit longer. I will end the silence by ringing the bell, which will cue our musical response. This morning, the choir will sing our meditation response. So let us begin by planting our feet on the earth, closing your eyes if that is comfortable. I want to try a little bit of creative imagining with you. So if you'll allow me, imagine your own personal rainbow. Maybe it springs out of the top of your head, or radiates out of your heart, or flows through you starting deep in your gut. Your rainbow contains love in your heart. Imagine that it wraps around you, protects you, holds you close and tight. Let us breathe and relax, and let our rainbow shine out. Imagine it spreading and lighting the room around you, glowing, cascading with color out across the space. Breathing in, breathing out, our rainbows spread. Reaching out, our rainbow joins and mixes with the rainbows of those around us, and joining us near and far. The blue sitting next to you, the orange from across the room, the green of someone you don't know, but recognize nonetheless, the white light around us all, close and far. Feel this love, this comfort, sitting with it. With one more deep breath, we imagine taking a chance and extending our rainbow beyond. Our intentions lead us forward, our rainbows spread. We breathe as our rainbow shines out. Let us all shine together in silence. I want to say a special thank you this morning to Sarah Solter, Ken and Aletha's daughter, who is joining us from Colorado. She wrote both of the songs that the choir is going to be singing today, so we are very thankful to have you with us today. Thank you. Look, UUs are supposed to break the mold. We're a living tradition that isn't bound by a bunch of stale dogma or ancient books. We're radical. We're cool. So why are we still having worship services every Sunday? What do I keep coming up here and saying these words? What is this all for? The worship ministry has, as part of its mission statement, the goal of producing services that engage the mind, touch the heart, and invite people to a new depth of spirituality. And there used to be a piece in our weekly script that said we sought the original meaning of the word worship, which was to seek out that which has worth. And so I was thinking about all of this and said, okay, what are the things of worth? What are the values which the speakers and worship associates bring to the planning and execution of our services? And I thought of things we value being inclusion, reverence, meaning, and intention. So let's start with inclusion. Inclusion because we value every single person that joins us on Sunday, and that means making the service accessible to new folks. In particular, honoring the wide range of beliefs and ways of believing, and leaving space for all sorts of different ways that we interact with the spiritual. It can be easy to forget that we have not all been coming to Fairview Avenue for the past 15 years, though some of us have been worshiping with Live Oak for maybe twice that long. And we might need to tell you that this is the chalice, or why we light the chalice. And so each week when we talk about how it is a symbol of our connection to other congregations, we are giving instructions and explanations so that all of us together can feel comfortable as we navigate the service. There are people here for the first time, and those people are very important, because despite how much I love my friends in the choir, I'm pretty sure they're going to be back again next week. Our ministries have also put a special emphasis on being inclusive of families and constructing intergenerational services. Our message for all ages, as you heard, is a time where we set aside for those each week. We have also worked on trying to get kids involved in the service, whether lighting the chalice or helping us collect the food for the pantry. Even the arrangement of our corner of the sanctuary now is, we've got art supplies, we've got a table, and it is intended to bring families into our service and not making them a part of us and not having them seated out on the edges. We value a congregation that spans generations. And inclusion is not just about who we are, it's about how we are this morning. In the first sermon writing group that I participated in with our former minister, Reverend Erica Hewitt, one of our lessons was that we should be mindful that there is, when we're speaking, that there is someone in the pews that is in pain. There is someone out there who is having the best morning, and someone who just barely got here. I mean, just chance alone suggests that someone is angry, someone is celebrating, and someone is still processing their grief. So we need to have a service that includes all of those hearts. Now, that's probably an impossible task. We keep it in mind. We try to hear our words through those different ears. And this is so that we can bring our whole selves, so you can bring your whole selves to worship. We all want to hear our story, and we want to be included. So our value of inclusion is thinking about how our service is heard. Then if we think about how that tone that we want to set, nobody thinks we want this to be too serious. This isn't Mass. And we know that Reverend Jonathan is going to tell a bad joke. That's part of the experience. We can also agree this isn't the greatest show in town. We don't have a rock band with praise music. No offense, Kevin. It's not that kind of experience. I think the word I would use is reverence. We bring reverence to our Sunday mornings. I spoke last winter about the question of what is holy, and I think that question interests me because I want something to be important. And maybe I'm not sure exactly what that should be. Something should matter. And so despite our Unitarian tradition of tear it all down, maybe we should be sifting through the pieces for what is of value, what is important. Is it a sense of wonder and awe, a feeling of belonging, just being in the presence of others to feel that we're not alone, a search for purpose? Maybe. So we bring reverence to our Sunday worship. And it reminds me of my childhood attending Methodist services. I have very few memories of sermons, but one that I have is when Reverend DeHart was preaching, and he quoted a book by Gordon Dahl. And the quote was that there are three key aspects to our lives: work, play, and worship. And unfortunately, most of us worship our work, work at our play, and play at our worship. It's a great quote, but I'm much too cool and hip as a UU to be that sort of a scold. But there's parts of me that does want us to take our weekly gatherings seriously. I want us to bring reverence to this time. Because if not on Sunday morning, then when? Right? There is something about this time that is different than if you just got together with your friends for coffee or went for a hike with the club. I have learned from our ministers over the years to talk about worship in a way that honors it. So even in the vocabulary we use, for instance, this is not a lectern, it is a pulpit. This is not a table, it is an altar, and these risers here are our chancel. These words we use help us to remember the value of worship. It helps us to encourage this, to treat this time with reverence. Much of how we start out our service, as Reverend Jonathan indicated, is about being clear that we are separating this time from our regular week, ringing the bell, lighting the chalice, calling us to worship, a time of silent meditation. Each of these elements brings us closer and closer to our center, away from the worries and distractions, more present, more here, somehow more attuned to what is really happening in front of us. Sometimes even aware of the truth inside us. Because those are the most valuable times at Live Oak. When I'm listening to a story and then I realize that it is my story too. When we hear music that brings us to tears. When the message clicks with you and lets you begin to see, to start connecting the dots. Maybe it's just imagining your mind in the spirit in the room lightening your load, or a light that shines on the sadness in you, brings you to tears, yet opens your heart to hope. That's what we are reaching for on a Sunday morning. A big part of this Sunday morning are our rituals. They lend to this atmosphere of reverence. There are these elements of our service that happen the same way each week. Now, I can tell you from experience that if we decided to change some of them, someone would notice, and someone would tell me how important and essential that little bit was. And so just psychologically, these repeated practices help us to move into this space of reverence and worship. But they also play an important role in establishing our shared beliefs, calling out what it is that we as a community value, our principles. I teach college students, and one of the things I have found is that if I want them to get an idea, you can't say it once. It has to be repeated 10 or 15 or 20 times. And so this is what we do. We repeat our principles. We repeat those phrases and statements which have meaning. We say, let us carry the light of our chalice into the world because maybe today is the day you see a way to spread the good feeling. Rituals, whether they are every week or every month or every year, keep us grounded, they bring us comfort, and they remind us of the most important lessons. And some week they'll just hit you. I'll be sitting out there in the middle of the congregation, not sure how I will deal with all of the forces that are pulling me every which way. And I will hear that although we feel separate, we are connected. Maybe I'm worried that this is not all going to work. And she says, we give with the faith that together we have enough. Our ritual is important when we mean what we say. Yes, our traditions comfort us, and we look beyond that comfort. We also look for meaning. We expect that our reverence is earned, not through thoughtless practice, but by a service that contains truth and meaning. We all know what it looks like when a ritual has lost all meaning and it is just a rote repetition, pursued out of habit or some such. And I think if there is anything that we can all agree on, is that we want more than that. Because, look, I think this is the genius of Unitarian Universalism. If I release myself from dogma, then I'm not empty. I am left with a search for truth and meaning, to borrow a phrase from my license plate. You don't need to take my word for it. In fact, you shouldn't. We are all looking for our own meaning. Now, some of you may not be familiar with Reverend Jonathan's work. After all, we are being inclusive of the first-timers here. And so I think it would be accurate to describe his sermons as taking a familiar text and looking into it for meaning. Often finding meaning where we might not think to look, in fairy tales or children's stories, popular entertainment. So he discussed the Barbie movie, not for the action or comedy, but to pull out the lessons that we have learned along the way, to see how those characters each speak to us in our own experiences. Jonathan has told me this is because we don't have a Bible kind of text, and so we need to look further afield for our texts. And then we should approach them like scholars, with questions about their deeper meanings. And part of this is also that those most important lessons that we are looking for are often the most subtle. The hardest things to understand are often best talked about with stories and images and metaphors. So I don't have a comfortable vocabulary to talk about a spiritual connection. So I light a candle and I tell a story about a light that spreads out across our community and appears across time. It helps us to see to the heart of the issue. Symbols and metaphor lend meaning to our practice in a way a clear statement never could. And a picture, even if it's just something we are imagining, it's still worth 1,000 words. And there's an added benefit to these stories, and that they are not vague, but malleable. It gives each of us the space to tell the story for us in our own way. Was your rainbow your soul, your energetic being, your guardian angel, your life force, or maybe just a cartoon? I left it up to you to fill in the gaps with your meaning. Because the truth is probably floating there over the top of all of those things. We are looking for meaning. We don't show up for the jokes, but for the way that they break down our boundaries to see what is really being said, to feel our joy or our struggles in a new light. In approaching worship with reverence and offering something that feels meaningful, to me, we do something fantastic. We create something together. A time that's more than laughs and tunes, a time that speaks to us, sometimes even changes us, and not through divine intervention, but through our communal construction. And this is what we are hoping for. This is what we are trying, because to bring all of these things together requires, at the end, intention. Your worship ministry, ministers, speakers, musicians, AV team, all of us are trying to give careful consideration to each step. From the chalice lighting words, to the images on the slides, to the songs we sing, we want them all to fit together, to flow from one to the next, to work in a way that serves the meaning of the service, that serves the lessons and themes. Do you know how many hours of worship ministry meetings have been spent discussing exactly how we should do joys and sorrows? It's more than you think. We've even had discussions about whether at the start of the service I should stand up and say welcome or good morning when I first step into the pulpit. Okay, I say welcome because I find it's more inviting. And if I say good morning, you're cued to say good morning back. And I think that sort of disrupts the flow. That's just me. We say our words with intention that they will sink in and spark something, and maybe just one of us. But we hope that you trust our intentions, because it doesn't always work. But we're never just trying to fill the space between the offering and the coffee. We're trying to be deliberate. So if we put a foot wrong, we hope that we have put it there with purpose. Now, this intention runs both ways. I've said this before to many of you, but there really is a kind of magic that happens in so many of our services. And it's not just the hard work and intentions of our minister or worship ministry. We just bring a thought or idea and lay it out in front of you. It becomes worship when you allow yourself to join me in that moment. I contend that the spark of the best worship services come from a congregation willing to take a chance and open yourself to the experience. You buy into whatever crazy idea we're trying. Some of you were imagining a rainbow coming out of your head this morning. You've supported us when we've passed around loaves of bread, when we played movie clips, when we circled the chairs or just stacked rocks up on the altar. On Sundays, when we've sung out or just sat in silence, when we have taken action, or when we have all tried to sit and make sense of the world. You've been there, a congregation that feels that there is something worthwhile. And I cannot imagine what it would be like up here without that love and support of the congregation. We couldn't do it, and I thank you for that. And so it is that intention brings us all together. My intention to bring meaning and challenge your preconceived notions, your intention to open your hearts, and our intention to experience life more fully. That openness is what draws us together, what gives this time meaning. And the secret is that for all of us here, this morning is one of the best of our lives, and we all struggled to get out of bed. There is something that is new to you this morning and something that just feels familiar. We have all come here carrying anger, and everyone has some joy in their heart. And we are all still processing that grief. We join together to celebrate, all of us. With reverence, with intention, we join together in worship. May it be so.
You may remain standing for the benediction. Our faith in this congregation is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. And we pause in silent witness to that unity. May the blessings of love be upon you. May joy abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your heart, now and forevermore. Blessed be. Amen. And now, as we extinguish the communal light of our chalices, may our service truly begin. The very light of our chalice into the world. Please be seated for the postlude.